I do like to receive comments on my videos. Sometimes. I'm never one to ask people to comment, however, this case is rather peculiar, and I would very much like to know people's opinions on this case. I will be keeping my eyes on the comment section of this video in particular, so I would encourage you to comment and share what you think. Also, there are a few names mentioned in this video, and it's a rather complicated one, but I've done my best to keep it nice and simple. This case takes place in Live Oak Springs, California, on the 26th of June, 1988. Irene May was a 23-year-old mother of 3 and was married to a man named Bobby May. Irene was known to abuse illegal substances, and on the 10th of June 1988, the two lost custody of their children. Shortly after, Bobby was arrested. And then, on the 25th of June, Irene was evicted from her apartment. To say the least, things weren't going too well for Irene. However, according to the CPS worker assigned to her children, she was attempting to make positive steps to getting her children back, but during this time, she was failing. As a result of being evicted, Irene needed to find a place to stay. A friend of hers, Cheryl Ann Baker, helped her move some of her possessions into storage for the time being. Another friend, only known as George, came along and helped Irene and Cheryl move her belongings into storage. While they were moving Irene's belongings, a 39-year-old woman named Kerry Lynn Dalton came by the apartment. At some point in the past, Irene, Cheryl, and Kerry had all lived together. However, Kerry had been arrested and had just recently been released. Kerry spoke with Cheryl. She was angry and shouted that the majority of the furniture in Irene's apartment actually belonged to her, and she wanted it back. She also told Cheryl that she was looking for some stolen jewelry, and that she believed that Irene had stolen it. Cheryl assured Kerry that she would keep an eye out for any jewelry, and let her know if she found some. Shortly after, Kerry left. After moving everything into storage, Cheryl made a call to Kerry, and informed her that she had looked for her missing jewelry, but claimed that she never found anything. At around 5 p.m. that night, Irene, Cheryl, and George went to go and pick up some meth. The pickup point was at a convenience store. While the three were there, Kerry pulled up in her truck with her boyfriend Mark Tompkins. Kerry and Mark asked Cheryl to help locate a stolen car that belonged to one of their friends, so they could steal it back. Irene and George decided to accompany Cheryl with Mark and Kerry. Despite agreeing to go along, Irene did tell George and Cheryl that she was afraid that Kerry might do something to her. The five then set off to try and locate this stolen car. Kerry and Mark were in their truck, and Irene, Cheryl, and George followed behind in theirs. As the group were driving around, they came across a woman named Joanne Feder at approximately 11:30 p.m. Joanne had pulled over to the side of the road because her truck had broken down. She was accompanied by her 3- and 4-year-old children. The group offered Joanne and her children a lift back to their trailer, to which Joanne accepted. They all arrived back at her trailer and began to shoot up. During the early hours of the morning, Kerry and Cheryl became paranoid and snuck away to go and search George's truck. Irene was the only person who knew George. The rest of them were worried that he may be a police informant. However, nothing to suggest that he was one was found. Back inside the trailer, Kerry got a hold of Irene's purse. She turned it upside down and emptied the contents onto the floor. Some of the missing jewelry that Kerry was looking for allegedly fell from the purse. Kerry was outraged. To make up for stealing, she made commands for Irene to follow. She demanded that she clean the entirety of the trailer, wash the dishes, and perform various tasks and chores. According to the others who were present, Irene appeared to be extremely scared of Kerry. Later on in the early hours of the morning, Joanne overheard Kerry and Cheryl shouting at Irene. They discovered that they had all been using the same needle and Irene had hepatitis. Kerry also began to accuse Irene of being a police informant. When the morning rolled around, Kerry demanded that Irene make everyone breakfast and dress Joanne's children. After everyone was done eating, Joanne helped Irene to wash the dishes. Irene told her that she had a knife and was thinking of using it on Kerry, as at this point she claimed that she feared for her life. Joanne directed Irene how to get out of the trailer park and to the freeway, and told her to get out whenever she could. Irene then asked Joanne to pass on a message to her CPS worker assigned to her children, that she would be unable to attend a scheduled meeting with her on the 27th, which was the following day. After this conversation, at approximately 11:30 am, Mark and Cheryl left the trailer to drive Joanne and her 2 children to visit her partner. Joanne's partner was incarcerated at the La Cima Conservation Camp. The journey to this correctional facility was approximately 45 minutes away by car. And now, Irene was left behind with Kerry and George. Cheryl and Mark dropped Joanne and her children off, and they went to go and pick up some more meth. Joanne told the 2 that she and her children would find their way back to the trailer, and that they did not need to come and pick her up again. A few hours after leaving the trailer, Mark received a call from Kerry. She told him to come back to Joanne's trailer immediately, so Mark and Cheryl dropped what they were doing and made their way back. As they were driving, Mark turned to Cheryl and told her that when they got back to the trailer, she needs to just go with the flow. The 2 arrived back at the trailer at approximately 3:30 p.m. and walked inside. Cheryl walked into the kitchen to find Irene tied to a chair covered in a bedsheet. Kerry said that something had happened whilst they were gone, and that Irene had tried to run away, but Kerry never went into detail about exactly what happened. Mark and George went outside whilst Kerry led Cheryl to the bathroom, where she had lined up a number of hypodermic needles. Kerry showed her these needles and told her they were filled with battery acid. She then said, "We are going to shoot up Irene with battery acid. It would be real quick and easy. It will kill her instantly." Kerry then told Cheryl that she had to be part of the murder, because if she were to help kill Irene, then she would be guilty too and would not tell the police. Kerry went on to tell Cheryl that Mark wanted to kill her too, so she wouldn't be able to tell the police. The only way to stop that happening was if she was to help kill Irene. That way, she would keep quiet. The 2 then walked back into the kitchen, and Kerry gave Irene a sedative to calm her down. She then gave Cheryl a syringe filled with acid and told her to inject it into her veins. Irene then said, "I don't want to die. Please don't kill me, I'm sorry." Cheryl tried to find a vein but was unable to, so Kerry snatched it from her and plunged the needle into Irene's leg. The acid had not entered Irene's vein and thus did not have the desired effect of killing her instantly. Kerry went inside to fetch Mark and George. Mark came inside and picked up a breaker bar and proceeded to strike Irene in the head and body multiple times. Kerry then opened the cupboards and pulled out a heavy cast iron pan. The group used this heavy pan to shatter Irene's kneecaps. Not yet satisfied, the group grabbed an exposed wire, hooked it up to a power point, and began to electrocute Irene. Irene had been injected with acid, electrocuted, and severely beaten, but she was still alive. Mark tortured her further with a screwdriver before getting a knife and stabbing her twice. It was after being stabbed that Irene died. The group then got to work cleaning up some of the blood on the floor, and Mark and George rolled Irene's body up in a carpet and placed her into George's truck. Mark and George then took Irene's body to a nearby Native American reservation and dismembered her body into multiple pieces. They buried each piece in different parts of the reservation, as it would be difficult for the police to search for numerous body parts on a Native American reservation. Whilst the 2 men were gone, Kerry and Cheryl both began to clean up and collect the items that had been used to torture and murder Irene. According to Joanne, she and her children returned to the trailer at approximately 5:30 p.m. and claimed her trailer was in a state of what she described as disarray. She claimed that a recliner chair, bedding, and clothes were missing, and the contents of her bin had been dumped on the floor. She also found Cheryl cleaning the floor, which she found to be strange. Joanne asked Kerry what had happened whilst she was gone. Kerry claimed that she had gotten into a fight with Irene and that Irene had now left. She also went on to say that she had accidentally cut herself and gotten blood on some of the sheets, but told Joanne that she would take the sheets away with her and clean them for her. Joanne began to examine her trailer. She later claimed that she found a pillow that was covered in blood in her trash can outside. George and Mark returned to the trailer at around 8 PM, and according to Joanne, the two men were covered in dust and dirt. At around 8:30 PM, Kerry, Mark, Cheryl and George left the trailer in one of the vehicles. As soon as they left, Joanne made a call to the police to report a burglary. Whilst waiting for the police to arrive, Joanne would later claim that she found blood splatters all around her trailer, a screwdriver with what appeared to be blood, hair and scalp material on the sharp end, a plug-in heater that also had spatters of blood, and a bar of soap that was covered in what looked like teeth marks. Deputy David Wilson arrived at Joanne's home at 9:02 PM. According to his testimony, he straight away noticed that Joanne was under the influence of meth. She was acting extremely paranoid and was not speaking coherently. The deputy asked Joanne what had been taken from her trailer. She replied that a yellow trash can was missing. She also told the deputy that she had found a bloody pillow, but that this pillow was in a box underneath the trailer. The deputy took his flashlight and looked under the trailer from several points, attempting to locate this box. He could not, however, find anything matching this description. He also inspected the entirety of the trailer, and everything seemed to be in order, apart from some dirty clothes that were on the floor. The deputy would later testify that there was no blood anywhere in the trailer, and no sign that a murder had taken place. He also stated that Joanne had not pointed out any blood spatters or mentioned that she had found a screwdriver covered in blood. Deputy David Wilson then left the scene. After leaving Joanne's trailer, Cheryl, Kerry, Mark and George disposed of the items they had used to kill Irene in a bin at a petrol station. These items included the iron pan, the breaker bar, syringes and a screwdriver. The four then checked into a hotel and discussed what had happened. Mark suggested that they should go back to Joanne's trailer and blow it up to make sure they destroy all of the evidence. However, according to Cheryl, it was ultimately decided that this was a bad idea, as Joanne also had children who were living there with her. Following the disappearance of Irene, rumours began to surface. Cheryl claims that she was fearful that Kerry and Mark would one day kill her to ensure that she could never speak of what happened. Cheryl also claimed that Kerry had discussed the situation with her, and even suggested that they should both kill Mark, so if the murder of Irene was ever discovered, they could just blame it on him and he wouldn't be able to defend himself. Shortly after the disappearance, the CPS worker assigned to Irene's children reported Irene missing, as she was unable to get a hold of her. However, this is when things start to become extremely strange. Bobby May, Irene's husband, had not seen Irene since the 17th of June, 1988, but this was because that's when Bobby was arrested. Bobby also claimed that when he was released sometime in July of 1988, he met up with Irene, and that after this meeting, he never saw her again. Irene was allegedly killed on the 26th of June. So, was Irene really murdered that night? Well, some think she was. Others think that the story I have told is a total fabrication, created by the police to make themselves seem more competent. As at around this time, the police had a bad track record of solving serious crimes. They had 22 unsolved murders of informants and desperately needed results. What I have told you so far has been from the point of view of Cheryl and Joanne, and was pieced together by their testimonies. And of course the perspective of the officer who inspected the trailer that night and claimed to find no signs of anything out of place, only mentioning that Joanne seemed to be in an unstable state. However, Irene really did vanish, and Bobby made efforts to try and locate his wife. Many people who knew him stated that he went through great lengths to try and find her. The family of Irene also searched for her, but to no avail. At some point in the search for Irene, Mark went and spoke with Bobby. During this conversation, Mark suggested to him that he should give up the search for his wife. In August of 1988, 2 months after the disappearance, Joanne's social worker came to visit her in the trailer. The social worker could tell that something was seriously wrong with Joanne. She appeared to be nervous and frightened of something. When asked what was the matter, Joanne got up and told the social worker to follow her. She led her around the trailer, showing her small spots of what appeared to be blood, and told her that she believed that something terrible happened in her trailer while she was gone. Joanne asked this social worker if she would take some items to the police on her behalf. These items included a knife that didn't belong to her and a portable heater that she claimed to be covered in blood. The social worker did as she was requested and brought them to the police and explained the situation to them. On the 15th of September and 16th of November 1988, forensic teams searched the trailer for any presence of blood. However, nothing was found. The knife and heater were also tested. These two tested negative for any traces of blood. The bloody pillow and screwdriver that Joanne had mentioned were never found. Towards the end of 1988, a friend of Cheryl and Kerry's was asked if she would be an informant in the case of Irene. This friend agreed and engaged in a recorded phone call with Cheryl. Cheryl, of course, had no idea that she was being recorded. In this call, it seems that she gave some details that could have incriminated her. What these details were, I cannot find. However, it does seem that further evidence was needed. In July of 1991, 2 unsuccessful searches for Irene's body were carried out. Dozens of investigators and dogs trained to locate human bodies searched for Irene's body. One search was conducted on a Native American reservation and the other near Joanne's trailer, which at this point she no longer lived in. And on the 12th of August 1991, 2 DNA specialists went to the trailer in which Joanne used to live in. The DNA specialists found small spots of blood in the living room and on the master bedroom walls, floors, and ceiling. These spots tested positive for blood. Later on in the same month, further inspections were carried out in the trailer. However, due to an insufficient quantity of blood, the samples were inconclusive of any DNA. On the 31st of October, Joanne was asked to pick out the people who were in her trailer on the night that Irene was there. She was able to successfully identify Kerry, Mark, and Cheryl by looking at their photographs. An unknown person also came forward and told the police that they had been told that Kerry, Mark, Cheryl, and a man by the name of George had killed Irene in a brutal way. From what I can tell, from 1988 to 1992, Kerry, Mark, and Cheryl were brought in and questioned as to what happened to Irene. But it was in 1992 that what happened came to the fore. It was in this year that Kerry, Mark, and Cheryl were arrested. It's unclear if they were already arrested due to other crimes or if it was due to the disappearance of Irene. Cheryl was questioned, and it's reported that she learned that she had been apparently caught on tape describing the murder to a friend. Cheryl then gave the first of a number of confessions. At first, she claimed that she didn't know who was under the bedsheet. However, she would change her story to what I described before. Cheryl confessed that she took part in the brutal torture and execution of Irene, and explained in detail what happened that night. In her confession, she also implicated Mark, Kerry, and George. George could not be found, and they weren't even sure if that was his real name. Mark came clean and spoke to the police about his involvement too, but refused to testify in court. Kerry proclaimed her innocence. and stated that Cheryl and Mark's statements to the police were totally fabricated and untrue. All three were charged with murder. Despite Kerry being adamant that she never killed Irene, a number of people came forward with claims that Kerry and Mark had spoken of the murder to them. A woman named Laurie Carlisle came forward. Both she and Kerry shared a cell after Kerry had been charged with murder. Laurie told the police that Kerry had told her that she, Cheryl Baker, Mark Tompkins, and another man were involved in the murder of Irene May, and that this murder had taken place in the Live Oaks area. Kerry even went on to say that Irene had been beaten, injected with acid, electrocuted, and was dismembered and dumped at a Native American reservation. And then, a friend of Kerry's, Patricia Collins, testified that the two were in jail together shortly after the murder would have happened. Patricia had heard rumors about the murder of Irene and decided to ask Kerry, "Why did you kill her?" Patricia claims that Kerry replied by saying, "Because she was a rat who deserved to die," but did not go into details about the gruesome murder. However, she did say that she didn't think there would ever be a case because there wasn't a body. But just in case there was, she wanted to leave town to avoid being caught if the police did investigate the case. What is strange though is that Patricia said that Kerry would flop back and forth all the time, and gave inconsistent explanations for Irene's disappearance. Kerry once claimed that Irene was still alive and had left town with her new boyfriend. And then a woman named Judy Breakwood also came forward and claimed that she was with Kerry in June of 1988, along with some other people that were friends with Kerry. These friends spoke to Judy about a horrific murder that Kerry had committed, and mentioned that she had shot up a woman with battery acid and burned her. Kerry overheard the conversation and said, "Yep, we really messed her up." The police offered Kerry a plea deal, to which she rejected. Despite this evidence, she continued to tell the investigators that she was innocent and that she would never confess to something that she didn't do. A man by the name of Donald McNeely also came forward to the police. Donald had shared a cell with Mark for 3 months in 1992. During this time, Mark told Donald about the murder. Mark even bragged that it was a torture murder and that the victim was named Irene May. He even told Donald the location of the murder, stating that it had taken place in a trailer park in Live Oak Springs, and went on to say that he enjoyed inflicting violence upon Irene. He said the original plan was to give her an overdose, but instead they decided to torture her. The torture and murder weapons were also spoke of. Mark said he used a screwdriver, a knife, and an iron pan to smash her kneecaps before stabbing Irene and ending her life. Donald recalled Mark stating that he put Irene's body into a truck, drove it to a reservation, dismembered the body, and buried it. Although it should be noted that Donald McNeely was described as a manipulator and a desperate man who would do anything to shorten his prison sentence. From the time that the three were arrested and charged, the police could still not find a murder weapon, DNA evidence, or the body of Irene. Despite this, the trials would begin in February of 1995, but Kerry was to be tried separately. Much of what I have mentioned thus far was brought before the court. Joanne testified in court about the state of her apartment, and that she had also found a screwdriver with blood, hair, and scalp. However, Deputy David Wilson had examined her trailer that night. He testified that he saw no blood or anything to suggest that a murder had taken place. The deputy also testified that Joanne appeared to be mentally ill and not thinking correctly. This was backed up by the multiple forensic searches from that same year that revealed no DNA evidence. Because Irene's body had not been discovered, the prosecution team presented the testimonies from the various people I mentioned before, and the admissions from Cheryl and Mark, along with other circumstantial evidence. During the trial, it was shown that a complete records check was conducted, which included Irene's fingerprints. Every single name that Irene used or was known to use was checked. These names included Louise Clare, Irene Louise Clare, Irene May, Melaine May, and Irene Miller. The system checked these names in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. The only thing that was found was that Irene was arrested on the 2nd of June 1988, and that the case had been dismissed. Nothing else that could be attributed to Irene was ever found, and did not locate any person that went by these names, indicating that Irene was no longer alive. If she had run away, it's likely her prints would have come up again at some point, especially if she was struggling to stay clean. The prosecution team also brought in the CPS worker assigned to Irene May's children. The CPS worker was named Nina Tucker. Nina testified that Irene was working to get her children back. Before she vanished, Irene admitted to Nina that she was struggling to stay clean and was neglecting her children. However, she said she wanted to get her children back. She was tired of being on the street and wanted to make changes in her life. Nina and Irene had arranged an appointment for the 27th of June at 9 AM. This meeting was to come up with a plan to work towards getting her children back. But of course, the 27th of June was the day after the murder. Nina recalled that Irene seemed to be positive, but she didn't see or hear from her again. She testified that Irene and Bobby had been taking parenting classes and made great efforts to be reunited with their children, indicating that she wouldn't just up and leave them. The prosecution team also brought forward a note that was handwritten by Kerry and seems to have been given to a friend. This note read, "Don't worry, they've got nothing and will never have anything. I get out on the 2nd of February, we've got to leave. Try and work on that for me. Try to find me a place to hide out till you get out, and then we'll split. I'm scared they're going to cut me loose, so if they do, I've got to disappear. Help me, I love you lots." A forensic document examiner testified in court that he had compared the note to Kerry's handwriting and believed that it was written by her. Irene also received benefits and food stamps each month. She had received checks on the 1st of June and 15th of June 1988, and they were cashed by her. After the 26th of June, Irene did not reapply for assistance, and the DSS had no further contact with her, which again indicated that she could have been killed. The prosecution team put forward the case that Kerry wanted to kill Irene for a number of reasons. Because of the stolen furniture and jewelry, because they had shared needles with Irene who was hepatitis positive, and because she believed Irene to be a police informant, and that in a drug-fueled rage, the group horrifically tortured and killed her. As I said earlier, Irene's husband Bobby May was adamant that he had seen her in July, which was of course the month after she was killed. Bobby even testified in court that he did see her. It's this fact that to me makes this case incredibly fascinating. The defense team pushed back that there was no body, no DNA evidence, no murder weapon, and no definitive crime scene. They also stated that the testimonies were collected from criminals and addicts, and that because of this they were not reliable witnesses. Meth is also known to cause hallucinations and delusions. This was also brought forward in the case. Kerry's defense team also suggested that the police had pinned the murder on Kerry, Cheryl, and Mark, and offered Mark and Cheryl a lesser charge if they testified and pleaded guilty. Cheryl had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Mark had pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, but Kerry pleaded innocent, and she never made any formal confessions to the investigators. Kerry accused the prosecutor, Jeff Dusick, of willful misconduct. During the trial, Kerry stated, "The thing that makes me the most mad is that he is lying, and he knows he is lying." The judge overseeing the case made a statement which goes as follows. "I think the record is clear that nobody has ever been found in this case. The record is equally clear that there is circumstantial evidence that there was a homicide. There's also conflicting circumstantial evidence that it may not be a homicide. In fact, she may still be alive. All three were found guilty of the murder of Irene May. Cheryl Ann Baker was sentenced to 15 years. Mark Lee Tompkins was sentenced to 25 years. And Kerry Lynn Dalton was sentenced to death. The jury's foreman, John Castleman, said that they based the verdict of death on the type of murder it was. Although there was no physical evidence to support the prosecution's story that there was even a murder, they believe that the corroborating testimonies from the numerous people and the testimonies from Cheryl and Joanne were sufficient enough to convict the three. The man, only known as George, was never found, and to this day Irene's body has not yet been found, and likely never will be, due to the way she was said to have been killed and disposed of. Kerry Lynn Dalton still remains on death row and proclaims her innocence to this day. Her sister, Victoria Ann Thorpe, maintains a blog in support of Kerry. She believes her sister to be innocent and has also written a book trying to prove her innocence, which is called Cages and is self-published. The book is available to buy on Amazon. If you look at the review section, you will find reviews from Irene's family and Joanne. As an insight into Kerry, her prison pen pal statement about herself is on screen right now to read. I do find this case strange for a number of reasons. Someone being found guilty and sentenced to death without a body, DNA evidence, or a crime scene is rather strange. I'm unsure as to how common this is, but I've never heard of it before. I also found it strange that Bobby May testified that he saw Irene in July. It's also worth mentioning that neighbours that night did hear the sound of arguing, but they never heard the sounds of anyone screaming in pain as if they were being tortured. Although, Joanne did claim that she found a bar of soap in the trailer with what looked like teeth marks, so it's likely they gagged her with the soap at some point. Please let me know what you think about this case. This case has gripped me more than any other, and I'm not entirely sure what to think of it. I'll refrain from giving my opinion and allow you all to make your own judgments, and hopefully get some discussion going in the comment section.